Hey everyone, Illumineers. Welcome to my competitive guide to Amber Ruby, also called a Rapunzel deck or a RedFasa deck. I've been wanting to make this project for a while. People on Twitter were supporting me with the idea and have been wanting me to make a guide on it based on my success with the deck. It's my favorite deck to play. So yeah, I'm excited to give this little presentation about how to play the deck, the matchups, what should you include in the deck, the mulligans, all these things. I'll be going through all these things in depth. So please stick around. Please, yeah, feel free to skip around if you like to. I'll be giving my insights as we go. This is all based on my experience playing this deck since set two. It's the only deck I play. It's my favorite thing to play, so I want to kind of share that joy with everybody and this community that I love so much. Yeah. All right, so let's get into it. About me. So I've been playing Lorcana since set two, The Rise of Floodborn, as I mentioned. I'm the Gaston who's been to multiple set champs. Cosplaying as Gaston, maybe you saw me from that. But yeah, I've been playing RedFasa, Amber Ruby since I started. I've done well at a few challenges I've been to, Fort Worth, Seattle in particular. I've gone there with my wife and my friends. I've won and placed in several set champs. So I've won set champs before, got top 4, top 8, all while running this deck. My friend group and I are a small unofficial team called the Poison. If you look on the top right, that photo up there is my little team there. We're all just best friends who play this game together. My wife CX is in the Gus Gus cosplay, and we play at home sometimes. But yeah, that's my little crew. This is my first trading card game, and so I'm so thrilled to be able to have so much success with the deck, despite it being my first trading card game. I'm from the greater Philadelphia area, and I am an avid Smash Brothers player, singer, and tennis player. So a lot of different hobbies, and then all these photos kind of show my success. And some of my friends who I've made. So on the bottom here, right next to my face down here, I guess, is Lorcana Goons, another well known player in the community. Great guy. Definitely check him out if you have the chance. All right. So why should you play Amber Ruby? What about this deck is appealing? Why should we play this deck? Well, it's great. It's a fun deck to play, and you can have success with it. It's good to try something new, so to diversify yourself. People at my locals tell me you should play something else. Why don't you play a new deck? And I'm like, no, I enjoy this deck too much. It's fun, but for everybody else who's been playing new decks and stuff, it's good for you to try something new. Maybe I'll change it up at some point. I do like bouncing characters. I like purple. You can surprise your local meta, and there's many ways to build and customize the deck. So you could build it including your favorite cards, whatever. It's a safe way to gamble, right? I know some of us as collectors, we like to get a good pull out of a pack, right? Well, with this, you can get a good pull off Mufasa, right? Mufasa, when you banish him, we get a character to play for free, Exerted. And it's a good way to kind of gamble what character do you think you might get in play. So that's always fun. And it's a fun deck, as I said. So what are the strengths about this deck? What are some good things about Amber Ruby? Well, the deck is loaded with character cards that have really good value. And they usually come into play with a really good effect, or when they're banished, they have a really good effect. So I have Prince Eric here on the right. So when he's banished, you can banish a chosen character. So just really cool abilities on characters, and who usually have really high willpower, strength, and can usually quest for 2. The deck is really flexible, so we can play aggro or control as needed in certain matchups. So if we need to play a little slower against control decks, we can. Or no, against aggro decks, like if we need to play control and slow the game, we can. Or if we need to go faster, we can too. We can outrun control decks or slow the game against hyper aggro. It's very synergistic. There's a lot of synergies in this deck. We have great board presence with our characters. Our removal is excellent, and we can even ramp a little bit with Gaston, who I'll talk about a little bit later. the opponent might not be as knowledgeable about the deck archetype. I think most people in this game know what Amber Ruby does, but I still run into a lot of people who are like, "What are you doing? What is it? What is this combination you're playing?" And they're confused about it. So it's always nice to show people like what the deck does. Um, the play lines are straightforward, but they can be flexible too. So usually when we start the game, we can usually have a turn one play, two, three, four. It's never hard to find our curve. Um, Also, what's really great about the deck is that there's no unplayable matchups. I think every matchup can be won. There are a few bad matchups, but there's none that are just unplayable. The deck can really do well against many different types. Also, this deck thrives in a best of three format. However, I've been strangely having success getting 2-0s recently. Um, but yeah, I mean, usually we're pretty good at going 1-1. But in best of three, we usually succeed. So weaknesses, things to improve in the deck. We need to be knowledgeable about the meta and what the opponent will probably play. So just like anybody playing this game, we need to be aware of what other decks do, right? Like what does the bounce package do? So you should be knowledgeable of what's coming. So for example, we don't want to dump our hand before be prepared. So we just need to kind of be aware of what our opponent is playing. Our card draw can be inconsistent at times, but this can be mended. So my deck plays plenty of card draw options, but if you feel like you're not getting as much card draw, you can add some more. Um, the deck can be on the more expensive side. I know many people who are veterans playing this game have many of the cards that we use here, because this deck uses the best cards from Amber and the best cards from Ruby. Um, but if you're newer to the game, you might have to spend money on some cards. I put an estimate there of what the deck costs in total, but um, overall, it's a great deck to play, and I think for the investment of the cards, it might be worth it to get them. It's not the easiest deck to pilot at times, and it's okay to make mistakes. That's a huge one. Sometimes I still make mistakes with the deck, but you know, just be easy on yourself, and sometimes that's why we're playing the game. We learn how to play different decks and be diverse. So don't be hard on yourself if you make mistakes. Um, there's little to no way to stop actions. We're very vulnerable to spells, songs. um, so like Along Came Zeus, all these different songs we're weak to them, but a lot of our characters have higher willpower. So Let the Storm Rage On, for example, is not going to take out our whole board or most of our characters. So just good to be aware of that. There's also little to no way to interact with the opponent's hand unless we're playing something like Bare Necessities. Um, but most decks don't interact with the opponent's hand. I mean, some do. Some discard, which we know we all have the most fun playing against discard. But yeah, so we don't really interact with the opponent's hand. And we may need to mulligan hard at times. Our deck runs probably like you want to ideally run under 14 Uninkables. I run 13 at the moment. Sometimes you can run at 12, 11, 10. So it's okay to usually mulligan hard and not be punished for it. But sometimes we need to mulligan hard to find our one drops, etc. All right, I'm going to spend this time talking about the cards. If you guys look up here, I'm sure you guys can see many of these cards are relevant. You've seen these in Ruby, you've seen these in Amber. But I'm going to go over what are the essential cards to play in this deck. I feel like are just critical for the archetype of the deck. All right, so the first one is Mulan, Injured Soldier. She's a 1-cost inkable 2/3. So she is overstated for a 1-drop for sure. She's a storyborn hero princess. That princess tag is important. And she has the ability Battle Wound. So she comes into play with 2 damage, which is why she's overstated. So she is one of the best cards for the deck. I'm always happy to see Mulan early, late, mid-game, and she's probably one of the most important cards just to find. We can challenge with her early or quest. She's a heal target for Rapunzel, our secondary one. She's a shift target for Mulan Elite Archer, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We are playing the big Mulan in this deck. She's a cheap character to help trigger Surfer Stitch's card draw. So Surfer Stitch's ability is if you have 2 or more characters in play when you play Stitch, you could draw 2 cards. So just putting down a cheap Lilo really helps you get to be able to draw a Stitch. She's a princess for Wreck-It Ralph Admiral Underpants. We'll talk about that card later, but we have a few princesses in this deck, which will benefit Ralph. But yeah, most likely she's going to stay readied early game so we can heal her with Rapunzel. Also, she can be boosted by Lumiere for huge trades. So if Lumiere, she could be a 3/3 and she could take out a Calhoun, for example, or like a rabbit or a fox or something. So really nice to make trades. Always run 4 copies of her. And then at the top here, I have Mufasa flip rating. So, when we flip Mufasa, when Mufasa is banished and we get a character back, how happy am I to see Mulan injured soldier? And I said 3 out of 10. I'm not too mad about to see a Mulan just based on how flexible she is. And, usually I'm pretty upset about a 1-drop, if we get one off Mufasa, but Mulan's a pretty great character. So always happy to see her. Our next one is Moana, Self-Taught Sailor. She is a 1-drop inkable 3/2, so another overstated character. But with her ability, she can't challenge unless we have a captain character in play. She is a Dreamborn hero, princess, pirate, and that princess tag is important for Wreck-It Ralph. So both of our 1-drops can be beneficial to Wreck-It Ralph. She pairs very well with Piglet, Pooh Pirate Captain on turn 2. You can see the picture up there. But with Piglet, we're able to challenge with Moana. So very awesome. She can quest every turn. She's usually questing every turn. And eventually the opponent's just going to have to take her out. You slap her down on the board and you tell your opponent, okay, take care of this. And most people don't want to trade with her just because they see it as a 1-drop. But I've had many games I've won just because my opponent refuses to take care of this card. So it could be nice to have that pressure there. And then in the later game, the mid game, she's really one of the best cards to ink. Because usually after turn 4, she's usually not needed as much. She is a cheap character to help trigger Surfer Stitch's ability. So again, just playing her with Surfer Stitch to help get that card draw is great. Most cases I prefer Mulan over Moana. But it depends on the opening hand and your matchup, and we'll go into that later. But yeah, I put her at a 1 out of 10. I'm usually not happy to see Moana after a Mufasa flip. And I recommend 2 to 3 copies of her, especially if you're playing Piglet. Speaking of, here's Piglet. Pooh Pirate Captain. He's a 2-cost inkable 2/2, and he usually quests for 1. But if you have 2 or more characters in play, Piglet gets +2 lore, so he quests for 3. A really good aggro tool for the deck. So ideally we play Piglet on turn 2 after playing a 1-drop. It leads nicely into a curve. Yeah, if we have that turn 1, 2, and 3 characters, which we usually always do. And yeah, I say depending on the matchup, if we don't have a 1-drop character to work with, I would usually play a different 2-drop rather than Piglet. But Piglet's always nice to see. With Lumiere, Piglet doesn't get brawled because Piglet turns into a 3/2. And Piglet also allows Moana to challenge like we talked about. I preferably play 3 copies of Piglet. And off of Mufasa, I say 2 out of 10. Not really a big fan of getting Piglet off Mufasa. But it depends on our board state, right? If we have multiple characters out, I'm usually happier to see Piglet. All right, Lumiere, Fiery Friend. A 2-cost inkable, 2/2, Dreamborn ally, and Fervent Address. Your characters get +1 strength. So our other characters are boosted by Lumiere. This is great. I always like Lumiere as a card, but in probably the last few months, I've really started playing with Lumiere more. So yeah, he protects a lot of our decks, a lot of our characters. He makes we have so many 2-strength characters in the deck, and Lumiere makes them immune to brawl, and most removals that's strength based. But most importantly, Gaston on the right here. So Gaston can survive brawl, and that's usually an interaction that we run into pretty often. It makes challenges more heavily in our favor. So if we're challenging or we're being challenged, it makes math hard for the opponent, and no one likes doing math from what my opponents say. But yeah, if we make them, struggle to figure out who to take out, it's always nice. And then later game, It protects against Medusa, Sizu, Empowered Sibling. It can. But I've had a few games where I slap Lumiere down on the board and my opponent can't take care of everything. So definitely a key player in the deck. I recommend playing 3 to 4. And usually Lumiere is not an ideal flip off Mufasa, but always could be nice. It just depends on the board state. All right, Mother Gothel, Withered and Wicked. 2 cost Inkable, 3/4. So again, overstated, but she comes into to play with 3 damage because of her ability. She is a primary component of the deck. I love this card. Always run 4 of this card in this deck because she's ideal. Because she's the main part of the deck, right? And she's one of the main parts. So yeah, she is the primary heal target for Rapunzel. Rapunzel, in case you don't know, when you play her, we get to take off 3 damage from a character, and we draw a card for each 1 damage removed. So if we remove all 3 damage from Mother Gothel, she's fully healed, and she can challenge, she can quest. But even if she's not healed, she's a strong quester and a challenger. And so usually after Mother Gothel's healed, I'm usually challenging, trying to keep the board clear. And she's usually good ink in the late game, or you usually want to hold on to her in case you want to pair her with a Rapunzel. Yeah. Also, if we're playing Julieta, also she's the heal target for that. Yeah, I'm always happy to see her off Mufasa, usually, so I would say like a 4 out of 10 as I put up there. But yeah, great card. All right, another amazing card for the deck, Gaston, Despicable Dealer. Those who know me with my Gaston cosplay, he's one of my favorite villains in Disney. Love Beauty and the Beast. But yeah, he's a 3-cost uninkable, 2 strength, 4 willpower, storyborn villain, and he has the ability Dubious Recruitment. We can exert Gaston and pay 2 less for the next character we play this turn. Any quest for 1. So yeah, he is essential ramp to cheat out many of our 5 and 6 cost characters. So Tremaine, Medusa, Hydra, Mulan, Mufasa, a lot of options there. And I'll be going into those play lines a little bit later. He has great synergy with Raya. Raya is the card on the right here. We can reuse Gaston's ability. We can exert him multiple times to get a lot of characters out. It's really insane what we can do with Gaston. We can play Mother Gothel and Rapunzel on turn 4 for that guaranteed card draw, which is really nice. Gaston can also challenge to take damage and be a heal target for Rapunzel. So if we play Gaston on 3, challenge with him, we can heal him on turn 4. Also, he's great against discard. So against, green steel, he's great just to be able to not ink as many cards in that matchup. So I'll talk more about that later, but I recommend playing 2 to 4 copies of him, and I would say 4 out of 10 for a Mufasa flip. All right, Pongo, Determined Father. This is one of my favorite cards in the game. I love Pongo. He's a 3-cost inkable, 3/2, just a hero, and he has the ability Twilight Bark. Once per turn, you can pay 2 ink to reveal the top card of our deck. If it's a character card, we put it into our hand. Otherwise, we put it on the bottom of our deck. So with our deck being all characters, or maybe all but a few characters, all characters, or maybe just a few actions, we're always going to be hitting Twilight Bark and getting a character. I've always dubbed him as the Amber Rabbit, because we're always usually getting a card when he comes into play, and each turn from him. The biggest thing about Pongo, which is why he's so important as secondary card draw, is it's independent. We don't have to rely on any healing, and it's just by himself. He can just draw cards. It's really nice. He's one of the best cards to play if we're top decking. Like if we're in that really unfortunate situation, we're praying for a Pongo. He's great after Be Prepared. So once our opponent be prepared to the board and our board's clear, we want to put down a Pongo as soon as possible and start drawing cards. Often he's ink if we have other card draw in our hand. So if we find in our opening mulligan, we have Rapunzel, we have Surfer Stitch. We might want to ink Pongo during the game. Sometimes he's ideal on turn 5. So you play Pongo on turn 5, and then you activate his ability on the same turn, which is also a really nice play. And then what's nice about Twilight Bark, I discovered a few months ago, is that the card is revealed and then put into our hand, so it's not technically drawn, so it avoids Diablo. So that's just a nice little tidbit about Pongo. I recommend running 2 to 4 of him, and I'm always happy to see Pongo off of Mufasa flip, so I said a 6 out of 10 for that. All right, Sisu Emboldened Warrior. I'm sure many of you guys are very familiar with this card. Sisu is a 3-cost inkable 1/4, and has the ability Surge of Power. So Sisu gets 1 strength, plus 1 strength for each card in the opponent's hand. So punishing the opponent a little bit just for having a lot of cards. And also Quest for 2, so really great. Amazing stats for a 3-drop, ideal for questing or challenging. You can challenge with this on turn 3 to then heal with Rapunzel. And then a great shift target for Sisu and Powered Sibling, which we do run in this deck. I recommend playing 4 copies of Sisu, just of how awesome she is. And then I would say 6 lines out of 10. Yeah, I would say she's a great Mufasa flip when we're playing Mufasa. And when he gets banished. All right, here is the main girl of the deck. One of the main cards that we love to see, Rapunzel. Gifted with Healing. I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with how this card works, but she's a 4-cost inkable, 1/5. She's a princess, and has the ability Gleam and Glow. So when you play her, we remove 3 damage from one of our characters and draw a card for each damage removed that way. And she quests for 2. So she's our primary draw engine and one of the best cards in our deck by far. Many Amber decks play her and are familiar with her. We'll never want to ink her unless it's desperate or we just have an abundance of cards. It usually feels really bad to ink Rapunzel. It's often worth holding on to her in hand for the right moment to heal. So if we're looking for Mother Gothel or Mulan, it's usually nice holding on to her. Or just challenging with someone else and then using Rapunzel to heal. With Wreck-It Ralph, she's the primary target we want to get back into our hands so we can keep drawing cards. And she can also challenge herself, so then she's healed by another Rapunzel, right? Always run 4 copies of Rapunzel. I've probably said her name too many times in this stream already, well, in this video, but she's amazing. And I would say 6 out of 10 for getting a flip off Mufasa, but it depends on the situation, right? If we have a board with damaged characters and we get Rapunzel off that Mufasa, then I'm happy. But if she's by herself, then it usually doesn't feel too good. All right, Super Goof. Goofy, Super Goof. He's a 4-cost inkable, 2/4, and he quests for 1. He has Rush, so he's able to come in and just challenge right away. And he has the ability Super Peanut Powers. So whenever this character challenges another character, we gain 2 lore. What a cool ability. When I saw this come out in Ursula's Return, I thought this was an amazing card. But yeah, he's a great lore burst tool in the late game to steal a win. There's been many games where I've won just by playing a Super Goof and my opponent just shakes their head or just gets a little bit upset, but what can you do? I would compare it to a goat in Amethyst, just playing Super Goof. He's an ideal aggro answer, so if we're playing against aggro, diggy hole, something like that, hyper aggro, he's great. When he's paired with Lumiere, he could take out 3 willpower characters, so like snakes and goats, other characters with 3 willpower, but it's really awesome. And he's a great heal target for Rapunzel, which is really great too. And then with Raya, we can use her ability so Goofy can challenge twice in 1 turn. So that's pretty great too. I recommend running 1 to 3. And I would say I'm usually pretty happy to see him off of Mufasa. All right, Prince Eric, Expert Helmsman. Great card, not really played much in the meta at all, but I think he's amazing. He's a 4-cost uninkable 2/2, so weak kind of stats there, but he quests for 2, and he has an amazing ability called Surprise Maneuver. When this character is banished, you may banish chosen character. He has the tags Dreamborn, Hero, and Prince. My wife and I talk about this all the time, but why is he not a captain? He looks like a captain, right? And he looks like he's, manning this ship. He probably has a little crew behind him. I don't know, but he's my favorite card in the game. I love this card for what it does, and I think it fits the theme of aggro and control, Amber and Ruby. just with the removal and with the questing for 2. I think he's great. He often allows us to make 2-for-1 trades. So if we're challenging with him, we usually can take out 2 characters for 1. He has great synergy with Lumiere and Teeth and Ambitions. So making him a 3/2 and challenging things is really awesome. If we're playing Teeth and Ambitions, we can do 2 damage to one of our characters to do 2 damage to another character. So that has a lot of good synergy with Prince Eric, taking him out and another opponent. Taking out another character. He's pretty safe questing into Shark Maui, and because we can trade with Shark Maui. And then also when Big Caesar's played, we can just banish her right back. So it's really nice in that regard. But yeah, excellent card. I recommend 1 to 3. You can play 4 if you're going nuts, but I think he's great. And I'm always happy to see Prince Eric off Mufasa. I said 7 out of 10 for me. Raya Kumandrian Rider. This is a card that came out this set, set 6. She's a 4-cost Inkable 3/3, so pretty good stats and quest for 2. With her ability, it reads once per turn. Whenever a card is put in our inkwell, we can ready another chosen character of ours, and they can't quest for the rest of the turn. So that means we can use our characters twice. We can quest and then challenge. We can quest and then ready them to keep them safe. We can challenge twice. There's so many possibilities with this card, and I recently discovered how good she is, and I think other decks and archetypes can even play her too. She's an excellent ability, like I talked about. She allows us to be really flexible with our lines and how we play. Often we can play her on turn 5, so our dry characters can then do something twice, right? If we pair her with Gaston, we can exert him twice, which is huge, and we can usually pump out like 8 ink worth of things on turn 4. It's really cool. I'll talk about the play lines later in this video, but she's really great. And then she's also a princess, so Wreck-It Ralph can benefit from her. And then I said 6 out of 10 for the Mufasa flip rating, and I recommend playing 2 to 3. I think some people play 4, but yeah, 2 to 3 is great. It is all up to you and how you want to build the deck, you know. All right, the main man, Mufasa, Betrayed Leader. So he has a 5-cost Inkable, 3/3, quest for 2, just like Raya, but he has a very insane ability. When he's banished, we can reveal the top card of our deck. If it's a character card, we can play that character for free, and they enter play exerted. Otherwise, put it on the top of our deck. So yeah, one of the main themes of the deck, he is good Be Prepared insurance. That's what I call him. So usually before Be Prepared, we usually want to try to keep him ready, so then we get something after Be Prepared. But smart opponents will also try to take him out and then play Be Prepared. So just be aware of that. But usually we're questing each turn with him, getting that 2 lore. It's okay to ink him as needed. There's plenty of games where I ink him, and it doesn't feel that good, but sometimes we just don't need him. So yeah, really only challenge with him when he's needed. And usually challenging with him I find is a loss. But yeah, amazing character. 10 out of 10 for Mufasa flips. If you're getting a Mufasa off another Mufasa, it's almost like your opponent didn't do much or didn't do anything. But I recommend playing 3 to 4. Most decks play 4, but I think some people may consider playing 3. I'm not sure why, but yeah, I would definitely recommend playing 4. All right, and then we're gonna go into our six drops here that can be played on turn 4 from Gaston. Just to keep that in mind. But this is Lady Tremaine, Imperious Queen. Oh my god. I'm not sure why Imperious Queen. I don't know why I struggled on that. I must be really tired. But yeah, 6-cost, uninkable, 3/4. She is a villain and a queen, Floodborn. We're not shifting her for 4, but we are definitely using that ability. So when we play her, each opponent chooses and banishes one of their characters. So very good removal, especially against red-blue decks that have the biggest characters. She's one of the best Mufasa flips. Like if it's later in the game and we need to banish some characters, if we get her off Mufasa, it's really amazing. And she's a great turn 4 play with Gaston's ability. So really an excellent card. I recommend running 2 to 4. I think more recently in the meta, people have been running 3 or 4. I run 3. I always consider going up to 4, but I need to be mindful of the Uninkables, and I said 8 out of 10 for that Mufasa flip rating. All right, Madame Medusa, the boss. 6 cost Uninkable, 4/4. When you play this character, banish chosen opposing character with 3 strength or less. So, and she quests for 1. Really a great card to challenge with rather than quest. I think with Lady Tremaine, we're usually questing with her for that 2 lore, but if we find Medusa instead, we're usually challenging with her to use her as a good heal target for Rapunzel. But yeah, she is really great against aggro decks with wide boards. And she's one of the best Mufasa flips, right? If we're looking to save a game or we're looking to really punish the opponent, pulling a Medusa off the top is really great. If we play her on turn 4 after Gaston, it's usually amazing just to banish a Robin Hood, champion a Sherwood. That's one of the best targets we could have with Medusa. Taking out Ariel's Spectacular Singer or Genie was fulfilled. So some really good targets I put down here. But anyone with 3 strength or less are just really good targets for Medusa. And it's nice to have that choice when we do. I recommend playing 2 to 3. I play 2 right now. I always consider playing 3. But yeah. And I say 8 out of 10 as well for the Mufasa flip rating. All right, Mulan Elite Archer. I think she is an amazing card. She is 6 cost inkable, 2/6, so weak strength, but really good willpower. We can shift her on turn 5. We can shift her on turn 4 though if we're playing Gaston and we have him in play. And then her abilities are straight shooter. So when you play her, if we shifted her, she gets +3 the strength this turn. So she's a 5/6. And triple shot. So that's her other ability. When we challenge with her, we could deal the same damage to 2 other characters. So if we challenge someone and deal 2 damage, we can deal 2 damage to 2 other characters. Or when we shift her and she deals 5 damage, we can spread 5 damage to 2 other characters. And she quests for 2. So she's best played as a turn 4/5 surprise to clear boards. Many opponents do not respect this card and don't expect it either. Respect it or expect it. She's really great. If we're able to shift her and clear the board, that's usually the game at that point. It's really good against aggro decks with wide boards. It's huge against Amber Steel Diggy Diggy Hold decks. I found that in that matchup, they have a hard time really answering this card. So it's really, in some matchups, it's really good to keep this in your opening mulligan. Really great synergy with Lumiere. So she becomes a 3/6, and then you can spread that 3 strength damage to 2 other characters. And then something that doesn't come up too much, but you can shift onto herself again to repeat the ability. So you can shift on her, do that, make her a 5/6, spread that damage again if you need to. She's a great heal target for Rapunzel, and she's also a princess, so we can use her with Wreck-It Ralph as well. I'm usually pretty happy to see Mulan off of Mufasa. I said a 7 out of 10, and I recommend running 2 to 3. A few Mufasa decks don't run this Mulan. I think maybe they just don't think the 1-drop Mulan will survive. But if you play nicely and carefully, you can usually shift this, and your opponent has to respect that or anticipate it. So yeah, great card. It could definitely turn the tide in our favor in some matchups. Stitch, Carefree Surfer. So this is a 7 cost inkable for 8, so really big stats. And he has the ability Ohana. When you play this character, if we have 2 or more characters in play, we can draw 2 cards. So this is our secondary or third source of card draw behind Rapunzel. He quests for 2, great stats. That 4 strength is ideal. Yeah, we can play him on turn 5 with Gaston if Gaston lives that long. And Stitch is usually questing, but he can soak damage for Rapunzel as well. And then sometimes, like later in the game, you just play Stitch by himself, and the opponent has a hard time answering it. I've had many games where I've played Stitch by himself without his ability coming into effect, and you can win games that way. And then sometimes he's the best Mufasa pull because our opponent tries to take out Mufasa before Be Prepared, and we pull a Stitch, and they groan because we draw 2 cards. But yeah, excellent card. I always recommend running 4, just because we have a pretty easy time reaching 7 ink. especially with Gaston. And I would say 8 out of 10 for when we pull a Stitch off the top. But again, it's situational depending on our board state. All right, Wreck-It Ralph, Admiral Underpants, 7 cost, uninkable, 6/7. He came out in Shimmering Skies, so a newer card. And he has the ability. I've got the coolest friend. When you play this character, return a character card from your discard to your hand. If that card is a princess character, gain 2 lore. So I think he's an amazing card for the deck. I'm not sure why other Mufasa players don't play him more. But I've been adding him here or there, not in every build that I play, but I've been liking him a lot recently. If we can get Rapunzel back from the discard with Wreck-It Ralph, that's usually really amazing. He has a massive body to challenge or quest with. If we challenge with him, we can heal him. But the opponent usually has a really hard time taking out this Wreck-It Ralph. I mean, 6/7 is no slouch. Yeah, and then also, getting that 2 lore, just for getting our draw engine back is huge. I mean, it usually is able to help us close games, similar to Goofy. And our deck, I mean, at least mine, runs 30% of the deck at our princesses. So usually we're hitting a good target with this. And then other great targets are the chair ladies, so like Tremaine, Medusa. You can get Mufasa back, Big Sisu, or even another Ralph if you're playing 2 copies of him. I recommend playing 1 to 2. Not too many, because it could be a brick if you get it in your opening mulligan. The 7 cost uninkable. It doesn't feel good to have in your opening hand. I would say 10 out of 10. It's probably one of the best pulls to get with Wreck-It Ralph. Off of Mufasa. And then being able to then get a character back is great. All right. Sisu, Empowered Sibling, is our next card. She's an 8 cost uninkable, 5/4, so really good stats there, and quest for 3. You can shift for 6, and she has the ability I Got This, so when you play her, you can banish all opposing characters with 2 strength or less. So mostly in aggro matchups, she's a board wipe, really great. We can shift her on the 3 cost Sisu, which is on the right. We talked about her earlier. And she can be played on turn 5 with the combination of Gaston and Sisu. So that's really nice as well. We can get her out pretty early. But yeah, amazing stats and an amazing Mufasa pull. I think... No, not the last card. Not yet. But we have Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, 9 cost inkable, 7/5. So amazing stats. And I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with this card. But yeah, quest for 2. And when you play her, you can banish a chosen character. So definitely the superior removal ability. Using Gaston's ability and Raya, we can play her as early as turn 5, which is absolutely insane. She's mostly ink when she's drawn in the early game, which is okay. It's okay to ink her. It's not necessary for the deck, I don't think, but it can be huge. I'm currently running 2, but I haven't always run Maleficent Dragon. She's kind of a more recent addition for my deck, but you can run another copy of maybe Maui, or you can run something else besides these 2 Maleficents. And then let me see here. Yeah, she's not always reliable to hit off Mufasa. I think we're mostly playing her from hand. And then sometimes she's the best Mufasa pull, but it at least feels like hitting the lottery. And also, she could be considered a tech option too, so not necessary for the deck, but it definitely feels amazing when you're getting Maleficent off Mufasa. And so I said 10 out of 10, and you can run 0 to 3. And before I go to our last character, I also realized I forgot to add Maui Hero to All. Also a very important piece of the deck. He's a 5 cost inkable 6/5 with Rush and Reckless. So not getting us any lore, but an excellent way to remove characters and also to remove locations. I'm sure we're all very familiar with this card. He can challenge twice with Raya. He's a great heal target with Rapunzel, and he's also one of the worst Mufasa pulls ever, which surprised me. Because I also thought he was one of the best Mufasa pulls, but he also halts our ability to get lore and the tempo that we have. So it doesn't really feel great to always pull a Maui, especially like late in the game when we're trying to get that last little bit of lore. So it can just feel really bad sometimes. So I would say definitely run 1 to 3 copies of Maui, but not 4 because we're not always wanting to hit him off of Mufasa. But an amazing card, played in many decks. I'm sure we're all very familiar with how Maui works. And then let me see here. There we go. All right. So our last character here is Chernabog Evil Doer. He's a 10 cost, uninkable, but not always 10 cost, because he has a few abilities. He's a 9/9, so unheard of stats. Quest for 3, and he has the abilities Power of Evil. So for each character in our discard, we can pay 1 less to play this character, and then also Summon the Spirits. So when you play this character, shuffle all character cards from your discard into your deck. So usually mid to late game, we're playing him for free. It's really amazing for the deck just because we run all characters. He can often close out games just because our opponent might not have an answer for it, right? In Steel, they have to use a lot of different songs to help take this out. Chernabog's also great against A Whole New World. So if our opponent plays A Whole New World and dumps our hand into our discard, usually if we get that Chernabog back, it just feels so good to play him for 1 ink or 2 ink, just to really boost our board. We also need to be mindful that he returns important characters into our deck, which is really great. But that also might ruin the synergy with Wreck-It Ralph, because with Wreck-It Ralph, we want to pull characters from our discard, whereas Chernabog puts them all back in the deck. So if you're running both, just be mindful of that. I wouldn't say that Chernabog's necessary for the deck either, but I think it's a great asset for the deck. So you might take out this Chernabog and play an additional Wreck-It Ralph or a Prince Eric or something like that, or maybe another Tremaine. But I always like playing Chernabog for this deck, especially because I have an Enchanted and I like flashing the Enchanted of the Chernabog in my deck. But yeah, I recommend running 0 to 1 because if you happen to see Chernabog in your opening hand, it does not feel good at all. But yeah, with Mufasa, I would say probably like an 8 out of 10. It feels really good to pull a Chernabog off the Mufasa flip. An amazing card. All right. So I'm going to include some tech considerations. So just some different cards that you can include in the deck. And I'm sure some of you guys are very familiar with these cards too. Our first one is Doc, Leader of the Seven Dwarves. 3 cost inkable, 2/3, quest for 2. And when you quest with him, you can pay 1 less for the next character. So he kind of competes with Gaston. He's inkable, and he gains lore when you're ramping, whereas Gaston does not. But the ramp is a little bit weaker. So I recommend playing 1 to 4 copies if you're considering putting him in the deck. Definitely a great card that I've used in the past, and it's definitely won me set championships. So really great. Let's see here, what else? Julieta. She is a 3 cost inkable, 1/4, and the ability Signature Recipe. So when you play this character, we can remove 2 damage from a chosen character. And that could be in our opponent's character too. Some people forget that too. It could be one of our characters or the opponent's. And if we remove damage that way, we can draw a card. So I find that she's often competing with Pongo. Sometimes I've ran Julieta instead of Pongo. Sometimes I've ran Pongo with Julieta. But 3 to 4 copies of each, or just a combination of 3 to 4 copies, is ideal. Right now I'm running 3 Pongo and no Julieta, but that might change in set 7. Who knows? They each have their pros and cons, but Julieta is more conditional, whereas Pongo is that independent card draw option I talked about earlier. Daisy Duck, Donald's date. 1 cost uninkable, 1/4 as well. Quest for 2, massive stats. And I'm sure we're very familiar with how she works, but when you quest with her, the opponent reveals the top dark card of their deck. If it's a character card, they can put it in their hand. Otherwise, they put it on the bottom of their deck. So she's a great aggro option. However, we want to keep our uninkables ideally below 14. So I don't run her at the moment, but I have in the past. I personally hate giving the opponents cards, but she's a great heal target too. I recommend playing 1 to 3 if you're going to run her. And then also a little bit of a weirder tech edition, The World's Greatest Criminal Mind. So I've played this in my most recent set champs because I know there's a lot of heavy red-blue, um, a lot of red-blue in the local meta there. So World's Greatest Criminal Mind is amazing for banishing those big threats like Shark Maui, Tamatoa, Big Sizu, even regular Maui, Hero to All, and Maleficent Dragon. I played 2. I recommend playing 1 to 2 if you're going to tech it in. Worst case scenario, it's ink, right? So most matchups you won't need it, but otherwise it's pretty good ink. Other options are Flynn Rider. Flynn Rider is a 2 inkable 2/2 with the ability Narrow Advantage. So at the start of our turn, if we have a character with more strength than each opposing character, gain 3 lore. And I like Piglet better than Flynn Rider, personally, for this deck. I think it's easier to get that lore with Piglet, because I think Ruby Amethyst does it better. I think other decks have stronger characters than we do. A lot of our characters have high willpower and survive, but other decks have stronger characters. But you can find success with Flynn too. I mean, honestly, a great character, and it's not going to change too much if you play Flynn over Piglet. Just make sure maybe you take Moana out. But yeah, I would recommend running 2 to 4 if you're going to run him. Lilo Escape Artist is another option instead of Piglet. 2 cost inkable, 1/2 with the ability No Place I'd Rather Be. Yeah, at the start of your turn, if this character is in your discard, you can play her and she enters play exerted. She's great when we're running low on cards if we're not finding our card draw. But you could miss out on the higher end cards when reviving her. I personally hate not having all the intel before I start playing. So, if you bring out Lilo and then you don't have enough ink to play the card that you want to play that comes up in your hand, like from the draw, that feels really bad. So I'd recommend 2 to 3 if you're going to play her. Judy Hopps, Resourceful Rabbit, an excellent card for this deck. 6 cost inkable, 3/6 with support. That support can really come into clutch. Come in clutch. And she quests for 2. With the ability Need Some Help. At the end of your turn, if you can at the end of your turn, you can ready another chosen character of yours. So if you use Gaston to play her on turn 4, it should be her, not ready. Oh no, yeah, I had it right. Yeah, great play for Gaston to ready him on turn 4. Yep. So yeah, you can play Judy Hopps and then ready Gaston, which is fantastic to keep him safe. The support is valuable for locations, a very similar role to Raya as well, and I recommend playing 2 to 3. I've played her a lot in the past, and I might put her back in the near future. And then Stitch, Abomination, was more played in the past, but he's a 6 cost inkable, 4/6, no special ability or anything, but quest for 3. Just an amazingly static character that is a really great Mufasa flip, and I recommend running 1, 2, 3. A few more tech considerations. The Hydra, Deadly Serpent. Love the Hydra so much, and I'm sure a lot of people also like him. 6 cost uninkable, 6/5, with the ability Wash the Teeth. So when he's dealt damage, that same damage is dealt to another chosen opposing to a chosen opposing character. So if this character takes 2 damage, you could deal 2 damage to someone else on the other side. And he quests for 2. Really good Raya synergy, great heal target. I recommend running 1 to 3. I ran him in my most recent set champs where I've won the whole thing, and he didn't come up too much, but it was really nice when he did come up. Vanellope von Schweetz is a 4 cost uninkable 3/3 with Rush, and when she comes into play, she has evasive until the start of your next turn. So she's a really valid evasive answer. It's a little bit underwhelming without Lumiere, but with Lumiere, she's able to take out Genie, which is great. She's a princess for Wreck-It Ralph, and I would recommend running 2 to 3. And then Goofy, Flying Goof. He's a really amazing evasive counter. He's 6 uninkable, 5/5 with Rush and evasive and quest for 1. So he can soak damage really well. He can take out the board on the other side. Really a great card. Definitely recommend running 2 to 3. I personally prefer the cheerladies at the moment, but I've definitely played Goofy in the past. And then last but not least, a more random pick, but definitely works for the deck, is Gaston Pure Paragon. 9 cost Uninkable, not always paying 9 though. He's a 10/6, so a massive body, with the ability Man Among Men, a man among men. For each damaged character you have in play, you pay 2 less to play this character. So with our deck and how it runs, you could play Gaston, I think as early as turn 4. I think if you have a combination of Mulan and Mother Gothel in play, but he has Rush and he quests for 2. Just play 1 if you're going to play him. And he could be a huge brick in the opening hand, and it does not feel good. But I've played him in Shimmering Skies, and I think I played him in a DLC, and he was really valuable for taking out locations. It was really great. The last few tech considerations are all actions and songs, so we're going to go through these really quick. Teeth and Ambitions I talked about before, but you can use this to deal 2 damage to one of our characters, to deal 2 damage to another chosen character. It's a song, and it's inkable. I'm probably going to run Teeth and Ambitions again in set 7 with all these Vanish characters coming out. But it has amazing synergy with the deck, good removal, and it lets anybody be a heal target for Rapunzel. Be Prepared, we all know what Be Prepared does. Also a good tech addition, and it can be sung by a lot of our characters actually. Surfer Stitch, Wreck-It Ralph, etc. But if we have enough cards, we could play cards after the Be Prepared. I definitely recommend running 1 to 2. With Teeth and Ambitions, I recommend running 2 to 4. Invited to the Ball, another newer card in this game, 2 uninkable, and when you play it, you can reveal the top 2 cards of the deck. The top 2 cards of our deck. These revealed characters are put into our hands, and put the rest into our hand, and put the rest on the bottom of the deck in any order. So it's definitely a nice option for our deck, because we're getting 2 cards from that. Ideally run 1 copy of it, but 1 to 3 is also fine. I've always considered running it myself, and it just seems like a really good option. Brawl, I'm sure we all know what this does, but it's great removal, 3 cost inkable action, banish chosen character with 2 strength or less. So just really good removal. And then again, at the bottom here, I want to put a note, so I really made sure to emphasize this, but really be mindful about how many actions we play. So ideally none to 6. And when you're making the deck and you're considering these options and you're building your deck, only play 60 cards. I know some people might want to go over, but we need to maximize our probability of finding Rapunzel, because we need to draw cards, which is something this deck can lack at times. So just run 60 cards, pick your favorites. Definitely use the ones I've mentioned. But yeah, all right, great. So we're going to go on to this concept of hidden uninkables. I think this deck has cards that are inkable that we really just feel bad inking or never want to ink. And I wanted to highlight that before we move on. So the 2 main ones are Rapunzel and Mufasa. If you ever have to ink these, you're probably having a bad time. Other ones are Pongo and Stitch. So be mindful in the opening mulligan. Not having too many copies of these, but definitely at least 1 or 2. But yeah, when you're going through the game, definitely try to avoid inking these cards. I want to talk about just the basic lines of play. So when you're playing this deck, after reviewing all the cards, what are the most optimal plays for the deck, right? So I have T1, T2, T3, T4. This means like turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, etc. So one really good example of a really good line of play is playing Mulan on turn 1, and then playing Piglet on turn 2, likely keeping the Mulan safe, or you can quest with the Mulan. But then on turn 3, you can play Mother Gothel. Even though it's a 2-drop on turn 3, that's okay. Because then assuming all 3 characters are there, you can quest with Piglet for 4, for 3, and then gain the 4th lore with Mulan. And then turn 4, you can play Rapunzel to heal the Mother Gothel, and you're just in such a good situation there. Just having cards, having a great board. So yeah, that's one option. The next option is playing Moana, with right here with Piglet. Does it show up? Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, playing Moana and then going to Piglet. Um, so on turn one, you play Moana, then you play Piglet. You can then challenge with Moana, which is great, or Quest. Turn three, you can even play Sisu. Get the lore of Piglet for having 3 characters out. You can challenge with Sisu and then heal it with Rapunzel. Another option is playing Moana and Piglet again, and then if you have enough cards and enough Inkables, which you usually do, you can play Mulan and Mother Gothel on turn three. What's really nice about this is that if one of them is banished, happens to be, one of them are going to be safe pretty much. So you're guaranteeing that card draw from Rapunzel turn four. So it's nice to have both of those options there. All right. Other lines of play. Turn one playing the Mulan. Turn two playing Mother Gothel. And then usually in this situation, I would feel fine exerting the Mulan to quest or challenge. Turn three playing Sisu. And then maybe if we're playing against a really aggro deck, you can still challenge with the Mother Gothel if you want to. But then using the Sisu to heal, that's fine too, with Rapunzel on turn four. And then sometimes we're not going to have a one drop, right? Sometimes we might not have this turn one play, and it might seem sad, but it'll be okay most likely. Because turn two we can play Mother Gothel, Sisu, and then Rapunzel, or you can play Lumiere, and then turn three, because you have the extra card that you didn't play turn one, you can play both of these, and then turn four you can play Rapunzel. So these are just some basic, really good options on how to play turns 1 through 4 in order to get the Rapunzel heal. Now I'm going to talk about Gaston though. So Gaston, the turn 3 absolute beast that he is. So let's say turn 1 we play Mulan, right? Or any one drop. We could then go to play Lumiere, Mother Gothel, or Piglet. And then turn 3 we play Gaston, right? So depending on what the situation is here, we can exert Gaston on turn 3, and there's so many options of what we can do. One of my favorites is then playing Mother Gothel and Rapunzel here. You can play them. You can play Mother Gothel for 2, ink, exert Gaston, and then play Rapunzel. Get the combo all in one swing. You can exert him and play Mufasa. You can play Mulan outright, or you can shift the big Mulan on the baby Mulan, which is great. And then just surprise take out the board, which I've done many times. You can exert him and play Pongo, and then pay the 2 ink to activate, which is great too. If you really want to dump your hand, you can exert him and play 2 copies of Sisu and Bolden Warrior, which is absolutely crazy. Usually the opponent has a really hard time answering that, but it also empties our hand pretty quickly. And then I also wanted to mention Lady Tremaine and Madame Medusa. If you have those in your hand, playing them on turn 4 is fantastic as well. And then you can also play any of our 4 drops here, including Raya. I know she's not pictured, but you can play Raya and a 1 or 2 cost character. So with playing Gaston on turn 3, there's so many different options that we have going into turn 4. So as you pilot the deck more, you'll get more experience on what the best play could be. But definitely a great card to have on turn 3. And then let's talk about Raya. So on turn 3, if we have that Gaston, we can then do some pretty crazy things with Raya. So the first step on turn 4 is to exert Gaston. Do not ink. I've made the mistake before of inking, but you want to exert Gaston to then play Raya, and then you ink for turn, because with Raya's ability, we can ready a character. So we ready Gaston, and then exert him again. So at this point, we can then play another 4-cost character. We can play Rapunzel to heal a prior Mother Gothel. We can play Goofy. We can play Prince Eric. We can even play another Raya. We can play 2 copies of Raya and really scare our opponent. And they can ready each other, which is kind of crazy. We can play then Pongo, Sisu, Gaston, any of these options we can play after playing Raya. So like in this little box, you can play 8 inks worth of things on turn 4 and really profit. And and then your opponent is just gonna have to deal with that. Like how are you gonna manage 8 ink on the board on turn 4? Also with Raya on turn 5, and if we still have Raya out, we can exert ink and exert again, and we can also play 9 ink worth of stuff. So on turn 5, we can play Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, or we can play Big Sisu. So the possibilities are there. It just depends what's in your hand. So what does the game give you, right? What's the hand that you're dealt? Just make sure to balance and not overuse, not just lose your resources too quick. It just depends on the matchup and what you're facing. But yeah, we love to flood the board. Just make sure you have a card draw option in the back. All right, I want to talk about the Mulligan. This is a pretty cool exercise I've done a few times in the past, and I've kept it on my phone, but I kind of wanted to present it. So I kind of went through each character card, right? And I put a percentage of what are the odds I'm going to keep this in the opening Mulligan, right? So for example, with Moana and Mulan, if I find either of them in the opening Mulligan, there's a 100% chance I'm keeping either of them. If I find Mulan, I'm definitely keeping it. But if I find Mulan and Moana, I might ditch one or the other. With Piglet, there's a 70% chance I'm keeping it. Lumiere 70, Mother Gothel 80%. It depends if I find Rapunzel as well, because then that kind of goes up to 100%. But I'll usually keep Mother Gothel for turn 2. The only case I wouldn't keep Piglet is if I have the other 2 drops, and if we don't have a 1 drop here. If we don't have a 1 drop and we keep Piglet, it kind of just feels like a waste. With Gaston, we're most likely keeping him unless we just have a lot of Uninkables that we run into. But Gaston is really just necessary to get to our higher end, which is great. Pongo, I'll usually keep him, but if we have Rapunzel, I'll usually put him back. Sisu, we're usually keeping. Goofy, Rapunzel, 100% of the time we're keeping a Rapunzel, maybe even 2 copies. But most of the time, if we have 2 copies in the opening Mulligan, I'll put 1 back. But with the 1 drops, I'll often keep multiple copies in the Mulligan just so we can ink them for later. Because if we ink the 1 drops, it makes our Mufasa flips just that much better. It makes it a higher probability of getting these higher cost characters in that flip. With Goofy, it's about a 50% chance I'm keeping him. It just depends what I run into or what matchup we're up against. If we have Gaston, I'll usually keep Goofy. So yeah, that's just usually a pretty good card to find in the opening Mulligan. Prince Eric, as much as I love the card, I'm usually trying to not keep Uninkables in my hand. With the Mulligan, I think I'll talk about this later. But we want to only have 1, maybe even 2 Uninkables in our opening Mulligan. We want to make sure all of our cards are inkable as much as possible. And I'm sure many of you guys, do that as well in your other decks, right? So we don't want to have too many Uninkables in our opening hand. Raya, I'm usually keeping. Mufasa, I might put this lower at 50% or something, but if we find Mufasa in our opening hand, that's usually pretty great, but it would suck to have to ink him to keep playing, so it just depends what else is there. Maui, I'm usually putting back. I'm usually not wanting a Maui unless I know I'm facing a location-heavy opposing deck, or just thinking that he might be beneficial. Tremaine and Medusa, we're definitely putting them back just because they're uninkable most of the time. If we find Gaston as well as one of the cheerleadies, then I'm inclined to keep them. But definitely putting them back. Mulan, the shift Mulan, for 6 costs, it's definitely more likely that I'm going to keep her, just because if we find her as well as the baby Mulan, as well as Gaston, which is a really high likelihood, I'm usually going to keep all 3. But she's also a good ink too if we don't find the shift, the 1 drop, so that's fine. Surfer Stitch, if we have a really nice opening Mulligan and Surfer Stitch is just there, I might just keep him just to guarantee an inkable card, so we can really just use the other things that are really good in the Mulligan. Wreck-It Ralph, I'm sorry, I love you, but we're not keeping you in the opening Mulligan. Definitely not Sisu as well. I mean, unless we're playing against like Diggy Diggy Hole and Sisu is just there, and I just know she can clear the board, and we have the shift options. I'm definitely putting her back though. Same with Maleficent, and then there's never a case you would want Chernobog in your opening hand. I'm sorry, but no. All right. But yeah, Mulligan tips. I do have a slide on the Mulligan. So yeah, try to find your one drops as best you can. That goes for every deck. Yeah, focus on playing our basic lines. So we should find something for turns 1 through 4. So 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop. But the most important thing is to limit your hand to 1, 2, or no Uninkables, like I talked about. Yeah, usually Gaston is the exception. We usually want to keep 1 Gaston in hand. And any duplicates too. Usually duplicates, we want to try to get newer things, but some duplicates are really good to keep in our Mulligan. Excuse me. So yeah, having 14, 13, 12 Uninkables, we can afford to Mulligan pretty well without too much concern for Uninkables. So don't be afraid to Mulligan pretty hard at times, especially if your Uninkable count is lower. If you have 2 copies of Rapunzel or Mufasa, try to put 1 back to find other Inkables. That's a really good tip as well. And like I said about Piglet, don't prioritize him if we don't have a 1 drop. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So I posted some ideal mulligans or starting hands, just so we can kind of go over them, and so what we know might be a good opening hand to have. So I'm looking up here on the top. We have a 1 drop Moana. On turn 2, we can play Lumiere or Mother Gothel. Turn 3, we can play Gaston or Pongo. We have a Mulan here for some reason, and then also Rapunzel. This is a great opening hand. We're likely going to ink the Shift Mulan and the Pongo because we have Rapunzel here. So turn 1 would probably be Moana, and then turn 2 would be probably Lumiere to keep the Gaston safe on turn 3. And then turn 4, we would play Mother Gothel and Rapunzel to get that guaranteed draw. You could also play Moana, Mother Gothel, Gaston, and then Rapunzel. That's a safer line, but yeah, this is a really great start opening hand. Down here on the bottom is a really great starting hand as well. So we have 2 1-drops. We have Moana and Mulan. We have Piglet, Sisu, Gaston, Raya, and Stitch. So with this opening hand, you could play Mulan and Piglet, or you can play Moana and Piglet. I would probably actually play Moana here to then benefit from the Piglet. I would probably ink Mulan at some point. I would probably ink Sisu. I would play Gaston on turn 3, and then just see what else our hand gives us later in that game. Some other ideal mulligans up here is really amazing. 2 Mulans, a Piglet, Lumiere, no 3 drop, which is okay. And then we have Rapunzel, Raya, and Mufasa. So turn 1, I would probably ink. I'll probably ink the 1 Mulan. Maybe actually no. I would probably ink Lumiere, play Mulan, and then I'll play Piglet, ink something else. And then turn 3, I would play this other copy of Mulan, so then we can really guarantee we have that Rapunzel online. You might end up inking the Mufasa and Raya along the way, but as long as we're able to draw cards with Rapunzel, that's great. And then this bottom one, if we have really this insane hand of, these 3 Moanas, all of the Moanas we play, Mulan, Lumiere, Gaston, and Raya, all of our cards are 1 through 4. This is really great. And all the cards are inkable except for Gaston. So I would just go to town, start inking these Moanas, and then play Mulan, Lumiere, Gaston, and Raya, and then just profit. So that's a really great hand to have as well. I want to talk about the matchups. So this might be a section you guys are looking forward to looking at, to really seeing. Based on my extended experience playing RedFasa, this is a chart just talking about which matchups are very good, slightly in our favor, slightly unfavored, even, bad, very bad, etc. So just kind of going over these. Blue Steel is our best matchup by far. We can push out as many characters as we want and not be too afraid of the removal they have. or the ramp. It's really a nice matchup, just kind of playing our lines and we could be more relaxed in that matchup. Our worst matchup is just traditional steel song. Good luck. um, Diggy Diggy Hole is also slightly unfavored. If I had another icon for Amber Steel, I would probably put it in slightly unfavored. And then the deck can be modified to adapt to any of these matchups, which is really a beautiful thing. I mean, if you, like in my last set champs, I modified my deck to where uh, Ruby, Sapphire, usually it's unfavored, but I kind of modified it so it's more even or slightly in our favor. So it's nice that you can change the deck to really make certain matchups better. But yeah, Sapphire Steel is our best matchup. Good matchups are Blurple, Amber Sapphire, and Ruby Steel, I would say. Um, and, I'm sure we know we don't really play against Sapphire Amber or Ruby Steel that much in the meta. I mean, maybe set 7 would change some things. But these are two really uncommon decks. But with the knowledge that I know, we usually don't have a bad time against those decks. We do pretty well against Ruby Amethyst, Amber Amethyst, Hyper Aggro, Emerald Ruby, and Emerald Purple. So green purple. um, Emerald Amethyst. But yeah, we usually do pretty well against these matchups too. I'll talk in more detail about why these are good matchups and how we should behave in these matchups, how we should play. Even matchups, I think could be either way, are Amethyst Steel. I think we're often just taking each other's boards out, and usually whoever goes first is a pretty clear winner. My wife CX loves playing Amethyst Steel. That's like her main deck of choice, and it's usually pretty even. I think more recently she's been kicking my butt because she just knows everything in my deck. And I know everything in her deck too, but she just really knows how to play around it. But yeah, it's a really fun matchup. I really enjoy that one. Amber Emerald, and surprisingly, Emerald Steel, I think, is even. With the use of Gaston, I think it makes it, in those two matchups with this card, I think he really helps to make sure we can still play our characters and our lines. We're slightly unfavored against Ruby Sapphire. I think other people might say we're favored in that matchup, but ever since the addition of Shark Maui and in set 6 and with all the tools they got, I think it's become really hard for us to be able to quest freely. And we're not as aggro as other decks. We're more mid-range, and I think Ruby Sapphire thrives against us, just being more mid-range and then being able to control the board after some time and running over us. But I think it could be even sometimes. It just really depends. And then I put Emerald Sapphire here because I don't have too much experience playing against it, but this recent Bend to My Will deck has been really nasty. I'm sure many of you guys have played against it before, but it's a nasty deck, and I had a hard time against it. But I would say it's slightly unfavored. And then our only really bad matchup, I think, just in general bad, is Steel Song. But like I said before, I don't think there's any unwinnable matchups. I don't think there's any matchups that are unplayable. I wouldn't consider any matchups very bad. I would consider Steel Song a bad matchup, but there are some cases where we can overcome the odds and win. So here's some specific matchup advice, just in general when you're playing in set champs or just at locals. How do you play against these different decks? And a lot of these things overlap. I tried to list some things that are good for both matchups or just each independent in combination. And it's amazing how different you'll play against each pairing. So with Ruby Amethyst and Ruby Sapphire, we want to draw as many cards as possible because these matchups can be long. I've played games that maybe go almost an hour long, but probably more like 45 minutes. But I've played some long games against these decks just because we keep controlling each other's boards. Because our deck can play control as well. We want to play aggro in the early game before Be Prepared can hit us. We want to prioritize Mufasa and Lumiere. Lumiere can really prevent the removal that these two decks have. And Mufasa can really help us just have that insurance against be prepared. When they wipe our board, we still have something on the board that they have to answer. So it's important to anticipate be prepared or other removal that they have. Be mindful of how much ink they have, how they're inking, what cards they're probably looking for. Yeah, look at their facial expressions. Yeah. Save Pongo for after be prepared. This is huge. And I talked about this before too when we were talking about Pongo, but playing Pongo after be prepared is really nice to draw some cards. Be mindful of not dumping too many cards before be prepared. That's the worst thing that we can do. Just kind of surrendering our hand to this, to be prepared. Goofy and Ralph will likely close our games with their with their burst lore. Kind of similar to how Amethyst can use a fox to use a goat to win a game or bounce a goat. We can use Goofy and Ralph to do that as well. So be mindful of the bounce package in Amethyst and what the bounce package can do. Be mindful of Shark Maui. Only quest with the board when we generally earn 5 more lore or more. I kind of made that rule for myself. If I have a board that can get 5 lore or more, I'll quest. It just depends what's in their discard, so be mindful of what's in the opponent's discard when we're questing against Sapphire Ruby. With Tremaine usually is really good into these two matchups. So really don't play her unless you're hitting something pretty big. I know Sapphire Ruby players will try to play Tipo in addition to Shark Maui to kind of insulate the Shark Maui, not to make sure that the Tremaine hits what's it called? Tipo or something. So just be mindful of Tremaine and what she can get rid of and banish. Also reserve Maui or other challengers for the location potential. So McDuck Manor, or if we're playing against Library, which is very likely, just be mindful that might drop and we have to answer Library pretty quickly so they don't. But we basically want to stall them out of running out. We want them to run out of cards. And I'm sure they want the same thing for us. Play our resources out, stop drawing cards. But yeah, for the biggest thing for those two matchups, which are probably the most popular matchups that have been coming up, try to draw as many cards as possible and play as fast as you can, getting as much lore as you can before the be prepared. With Emerald Amethyst, this is a fun matchup as well. Here we are welcome to flood the board. We can challenge for much of the game, controlling the board and likely getting steady lore until we outvalue the opponent. So our characters have a lot of value, and probably more value than theirs, but they can move much faster than we can. I think they usually build their decks to be more aggro based. So we want to control the board to where the game will go long enough that we can take over. Lumiere is really helpful in this matchup to prevent the bounce effect. So if they're playing Cloud Kicker, or if they're playing I don't know, just any kind of bounce, Lumiere is really helpful for that. I've ran into that before. It's also really important in this matchup to find your 1-drops to really be able to stop them. Also, evasive removal will be important, for the Elsas, Genies. So be mindful that you might need some evasive removal. And then against Steel, Amethyst, Steel, some pretty good feedback here. Our low willpower guys or our damaged characters, the Mulan, the Mother Gothels, they're likely just going to be taken out. They're not really worth it. The early game is hard for us in this matchup, just because they play Let the Storm Rage on, Fire the Cannons, and we groan. But yeah, just be mindful of our low willpower guys in the beginning. Evasive removal is important here, but our higher willpower guys are going to thrive. It's going to be harder for them to remove. Be mindful of the library, having the strength to control it. But we're likely going to be making a lot of trades here. Or if we're going first, we're going to have them answer our board. So yeah, that's a really fun matchup. I really enjoy it. But just play our regular lines in that matchup, and don't be afraid to flood the board in that matchup because they don't have anything like be prepared to wipe the board. Maybe grab your sword, but that's not really that meta, I don't think, with that deck. Okay, with Sapphire Steel, our best matchup, like I said. So, play our usual play lines. Don't be afraid to flood the board. quest when possible early game, because with steel, any steel matchup, they're going to be able to take out our guys whether they're exerted or not. So I just quest anyways. Usually that's my advice. And then also in the early game, they're usually just ramping too. So don't be scared to quest. Whereas in some matchups, like against Ruby Amethyst, you might be scared of questing for those rushers, right? So, yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Feel free to play more aggro against Sapphire Steel. Let the opponent answer the board. It might be harder for them. And also, I find Sapphire Steel, they play Grab Your Sword, right? They play those actions that do damage to our characters, but often not enough because we have such high willpower characters, and we can take advantage of that by healing that with Rapunzel. So that's why it's one of our best matchups. I really enjoy playing against Sapphire Steel. With Emerald Steel and Amber Emerald, the advice is kind of similar for these two. Don't be afraid to flood the board with characters. However, with the discard, if you have someone that you really want to keep in your hand, and they might play, what is that song? Oh yeah, don't talk about Bruno. That song. We don't talk about Bruno. Duh. We want to have two cards. We might want to have two cards in hand. So just be mindful of that. But Gaston's really important in this matchup because we're going to be discarded, our hand's going to be gone, and he's going to be staying there helping us get our characters out with the ink that we just don't have. But yeah, we want to prioritize card draw wherever we can in this matchup. We want to remove their board because they're also a combo-heavy deck. So we want to banish their characters so certain songs, like Under the Sea, they can't happen. But yeah, evasive removal will be important as well. Diablo, that kind of thing. We want to quest with our turn 1 and 2/1 and turn 2 characters as well because they could be removed. So keep that in mind. Blurple, I think is also a really good matchup for us. I've never had too many issues against Blurple. Play our usual lines. Yeah, evasive removal, important. We can play more aggro, let them answer the board. And this matchup can also be long too, so be sure to draw plenty of cards. And then just be mindful of the bounce package, right, and their abilities. And it's often important to banish a rabbit before they can take advantage of it, right? So if you see a rabbit that's exerted and you can take it out, I usually would recommend doing so. Or a fox or something like that. So in some matches we want to challenge more than other ones. All right, just a few more here. So we have Amber Amethyst, Amber Sapphire, and Amber Steel. And that's in particular that's Diggy Diggy Hole. So this is some advice for those matchups, and you can kind of group it together. It's usually okay to dump your hand in these matchups, whereas the other matchups we talked about, you usually want to conserve your hand, because Daisy usually helps us refill it. Daisy draws us cards like no other deck can, like no other, because we run so many characters, right? So it's really helpful. We want to find our control characters, especially Shift Mulan, like I talked about, because she can board wipe their boards and manage these matchups. Mulan is really good at controlling the opponent's side, so definitely try to find Mulan. We want to play control in the early game because these decks can move so quickly, and they can just play aggro, dump their characters, and they can play faster than we can, usually. But once we gain control, the match should be in our favor. So usually it's smooth sailing once we eliminate their board, they're running low on cards. So yeah, that's my advice for that matchup. Against Steel Song, good luck. This is our worst matchup. It's a hard one. If we ever have the opportunity to eliminate any singers like Ariel, definitely take them out if we can. Any characters really we want to remove as early as possible. Excuse me. Always ink when possible. I know sometimes it might not feel good to ink or certain characters, but they often rely on a whole new world. So being able to take advantage of the times that we have inked is really good. Also, Gaston is really good against a whole new world because we still get to keep that ramp on the board for all those new cards that we have in our hand. Our 1 and 2 drops likely won't survive turn 1 and 2 because they're often sung away. So other heal targets like the 3-drop Caesar are great. So definitely keep those in your hand. But play your regular lines against Steel Song. Just pray for them to brick or something. It's a hard matchup, but there are some situations where we can win in that matchup. So just try your best, and don't be too hard on yourself if it doesn't go well in that matchup. With the other 3 on the bottom, we're not as familiar with these matchups. I'm not familiar with them personally. They're not as well represented, except for Emerald Sapphire, as I talked about. So yeah, card draw is weaker with these decks. Actually, we have better card draw than these decks, I think. Maybe except for the Bend to My Will deck. But yeah, just try to outlast them and play our regular lines. Prioritize Lumiere in these 3 matchups because I think Lumiere really helps, and just have fun. Just play your hands, play the lines I've talked about, and it should be okay. But yeah, if you want any more advice on these matchups, definitely reach out to me. I'm happy to give any advice that maybe I haven't mentioned or anything that I haven't thought of. But I just wanted to at least talk about these matchups and how you should play against these. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about being on the play and what advice, what tips that you should take away when you're on the play. Definitely try to find your 1-drops. That's probably a basic advice point, but find your 1-drops. Be intentional about looking for card draw, because we're gonna dump our characters to pressure our opponent, so we're gonna need to refill our hand at some point. Try to get Rapunzel, Pongo, and we can afford to be speedier. We can make our opponent responsible to answering our board state. It depends on the matchup, but we can afford to play aggro when we're on the play, and that's why I have a picture of Piglet up there. On the draw, Mulligan hard for our 1-drops. Try to really find your 1-drops. If you have to put 5, 6, 7 back, that's okay, because usually we can find our inkable cards and it's gonna be a fine. Defense, challenge. Usually we want to play more control when we're on the draw. I always see it as we're playing defense when we're on the draw, and I'm sure many of you guys can relate to that as well, but play a slower game when you're on the draw. The extra card for us is useful that we draw. But overall, play the lines that you're comfortable with, and react to the opponent. If the opponent gets unlucky, take advantage of that. You could play more aggro. But yeah, or if they get lucky and they play their optimal hands, react to that. Try to see what you can challenge and take out. So this is my current deck that I'm running. My what a guy, Gaston. Yeah, just because Gaston is such a focal point of the deck, and I love Gaston, that's why I named it this way. But this is my deck and how many of each card I'm running. And like I said, you could build it however you like, but there's a lot of pieces that are necessary here, like I talked about. But yeah, in the higher end, the Maleficent, the Chernabog, you could probably change those out. But this deck I find the most success with. It's a great balance of removal and ramp and card draw. And we can really have a really good board state with this. But yeah, this is my current deck. I really enjoy playing it. Feel free to play it as well, or make any modifications that you want to. Yeah. I'm gonna give a few alternative deck lists. Some different options that you can have. This is a picture of my champion playmat winning deck from the last set champs I was in. So very similar to my regular deck that I showed. I'm playing 4 Mulan, 3 Moana, 3 Piglet, 4 Mother Gothel, 3 Lumieres, 3 Gastons, 4 Big Sisu, 3 Pongo, 4 Rapunzel, 1 Prince Eric, 3 Raya, 4 Mufasa, 1 Maui. I put the Hydra in here because I was anticipating playing against Red Blue, and I usually find the Hydra is pretty good, especially when questing against Shark Maui. I was playing 4 Tremaines, 2 Medusas, 3 Mulans, the big Mulan. I was playing 4 Stitch. I played 2 Wreck-It Ralph just to keep the game going longer, having that card draw, being able to get Rapunzel's back. And the spicy pick of the deck, well, not the Maleficent, but World's Greatest Criminal Mind. I love this card so much. I love the movie. I love The Great Mouse Detective, but this song was just huge for being able to take out Shark Maui and have an answer to it, because sometimes our deck has a hard time against Shark Maui, and it just felt so good at my last set champs to be able to take over the red blue matchup. So this deck, for example, is tailored against red blue, and you can tailor it however you want to if you find a certain matchup is dominating. Some different deck lists I have. This first one on the left is more of a high end. So I'm playing Julieta instead of Pongo, but I'm playing 2 Hydra. I'm playing 4 Maleficent Dragons. Yeah, you can edit it however you want to, but this is a little bit more higher end. A lot more characters on the higher end, obviously. And the other one is no Gaston, so no ramp, which I probably wouldn't recommend, but you can play that way if you want. And then that allows us to have a lot more uninkable space. So, yeah. Excellent. And then just for fun, I included some set 7 cards that I look forward to testing. This reveal season has been a lot of fun, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have been enjoying seeing your favorite cards for your decks. Unfortunately, for the RedFasa decks, for my deck in particular, there's not too many additions that look really good. It's very racer themed or pirate themed, but of the reveals so far, I'm looking forward to testing these 2. In particular, the Moana Island Explorer. This 4-drop inkable, 4 strength, 3 willpower, evasive princess, and whenever she challenges another character, you can give one of your characters +3 strength. And I think that's amazing for the deck. It gives it more challenging support, and it kind of reminds me of like a red crab almost, like a crab for red. And then also this Lyle Fork might not be the best fit for the Red Fasa deck. I mean, it damages our characters, which is really nice, but it's a lot of damage, and it's a high-end card, great stats, but I'm looking forward to testing these in the future for sure. But yeah, that's all I really had for this project, for this video. I know it's been a long one. Thank you if you watched the whole thing towards the end, until the end. I'm happy to give any more advice about the deck. If you want to reach out to me personally, I have my YouTube, my Twitter, or X, I guess now it's called, and my Discord down there. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. This project was a really fun project to make for the community. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. I love this deck. It's so much fun to play, and I'm really happy to have a lot of success with a deck that's not really played that much. Yeah, I hope you give it a shot at your locals or your set champs, or maybe even DLCs in the future. But yeah, thanks so much for being with me, and have fun questing and enjoy playing Red Fasa.